Hi, I'm Dana, this is Otis, and this is also another episode of Learning to be Autistic. So for anyone new, it's a little series that I started right back when I first started this channel, and it's basically I felt like I had to completely learn how to be a person again after getting my autism diagnosis. I didn't feel like I had any idea how to exist in the world as an autistic person after masking and just spending my entire life trying to be a normal person and having to completely drop that and be like, I'm not a normal person, I'm an autistic person, and I've got to learn to live like this and make the most of it and try to have a happy, nice, fulfilling life, you know? And I've kind of rebooted the series because it was originally very much going along with like me figuring things out, and now I feel like I've figured some stuff out and I can start sharing not necessarily advice but like more of a full and reflective experience because I'm not currently going through it myself, you know? So I've tried to start it from sort of the very beginning of when you first start to think that you might be autistic and everything. So I'll link a previous episode up here, they'll also be linked down below, and we can get into this one now. As always, this is all very much based on me and my experience. I don't know what everyone else's experiences are, I can't speak for them, I can't reflect on them, they're not mine. So this is about me, and obviously all autistic people are very different, and especially because this is talking about the diagnostic process, it will be very different even like council area to council area within the UK, never mind in other countries. So with that out the way, the first step for me was going and speaking to my GP, and I was terrified. I put it off for like months and months and months. I'd phone up to make an appointment and just hang up and be like, oh shit, I don't know what to say to the receptionist, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. Going to the doctors and speaking to a medical professional was something I'd already had to do quite a lot for all the mental health issues I had that I now believed to be autism, and it felt very difficult to me to go into a doctor's office and be like, I know you've diagnosed me with all these mental health issues and put me on all these meds and like done all this stuff, but I actually think that you've missed the main part of it, which is that I'm autistic. You know, it felt like a very daunting process where I'd have to like really self-advocate and be quite confrontational. I was very, very scared. But I got quite lucky, I think, because I saw a GP, like a doctor that I'd never seen before. I still remember his name. I don't know if I should. I saw Dr. Hussey, and I've not seen him before since that time, but it was such a pleasant experience for me because I went in with like loads of notes, things that I'd found online, things that I had like reflected on from my childhood, things that I related to with my diagnosed autistic brother. Like I went in with so much to back myself up, so ready to have a fight, and I sat down and he was like, so what's brought you in today? And I was like, I've been doing all this research and I really don't know what's wrong with me, but it does feel like something's wrong with me, and I've been coming to doctors for the last like 10 years saying I think there's something wrong with me and I think I might have figured it out, and I reckon I'm probably autistic. Like I just rambled at him. I think it was probably very similar to what I just did, and he just sort of like gave me a very small smile and was like, would you like to be referred to be diagnosed? And I was like, yes, I really would. That would be fantastic. And he like just typed a few bits and was like, yeah, there you go. The reference has gone through. You'll get a letter in the next few days. And I was like, oh my God, it's just like that. I'm just gonna be like immediately diagnosed. This is fabulous. And then I got the letter a few days later that was like, you're on the waiting list. See you at some point. I did figure it out at some point because I saved all the letters. I'm not sure if I still do have all the letters, but it was right around 18 months that I waited, and within that time I got letters probably like every 6 months or so just saying like, you are on the waiting list, we will get around to you. And I do, from what I've seen around, that's a much longer waiting time now. Like it already felt like such, like I feel like I barely remember that time period because I was just there waiting and existing, you know. Like I had so many issues that I didn't feel like I was able to accommodate to because I didn't know that I was autistic, but I still had all of these issues, and every time I'd gone to the doctors they'd been like, you're anxious, you just have anxiety, you're just depressed. So I didn't want to continue getting meds during that time, not knowing if something else was going on that wouldn't be helped by the meds, you know. It felt like just this absolute waiting period where I couldn't actually do anything because I had such horrible like fraudulent feelings. Like it feels like it was beyond imposter syndrome. Like I fully was like, I am sure that I'm autistic. Like I wouldn't go through like the hassle of being on this waiting list and waiting to be diagnosed if I wasn't like so sure that this is the thing. But also I don't know that it is the thing. I don't feel like I can tell people I'm autistic. I don't feel like, this is me speaking in like that tense, not now, you know, but I didn't feel like I could accommodate to any autistic things because I didn't know that I was autistic. It felt like I just existed as a shell waiting to be filled kind of thing for like 18 months. And then I finally got the letter saying, you have an appointment at this place on this day. Please bring a parent or someone who knew you as a child. And I absolutely shit myself because I hadn't told anyone. You know, this was very much just between me and my partner at the time. And suddenly I had to tell my mum, I think I'm autistic. I've been on this big long waiting list. I've finally got an appointment and you need to come with me to explain to them how autistic I was as a child. You know, that was the next thing that I was absolutely terrified about, because you know, at that point I was seeing my mum every day and we had a close relationship, but the truth of it is that she was neglectful throughout my childhood and quite narcissistic and just not very nice to me as an adult, and expected a lot from me while giving me very little in return. So it was already like we pretended to be close and like we really loved each other, but I think we both actually kind of hated each other. It was a very strange relationship, but I had to go and be like, hiya mum, can you do this for me? And it was one of those things where she reacted in the complete opposite to what I was expecting, and she was very like, yeah sure, we can find out, you've clearly got something going on, maybe it's this. And looking back on it, it wasn't as nice as I thought it was at the time. Like, I felt real accepted at the time, and looking back on it now, I feel like she was just like, well, there is something drastically wrong with you, so we may as well start ticking stuff off, hadn't we? But it meant that she agreed to do it. So we showed up at the address that we'd been given, and it was fucking horrible, to be quite honest with you. I don't know what the building was. I think it might have been some sort of a community centre or something. It wasn't like a hospital or a doctor's office or the kind of medical situation that I was expecting, and no one knew like why we were there or what they were supposed to do with us. We spoke to multiple different like staff members and the receptionist and everyone, and they were like, you're here for an autism diagnosis? And eventually we just got sent to wait in like a random bit of corridor until the man that was diagnosing me came through, and he was very apologetic and very like, sorry, I was meant to be here, I've been late, but we're going into this room, and took me into like a very like blank, just calm, quiet little room, along with my mother obviously, and we sat at this big like conference table, and I was absolutely shitting it. Like, it felt like so much hung on the next like hour and a half that I was in the room with this man, and the vast majority of it, especially towards the beginning of the session, was focused entirely on my mother. It was my mum telling him about like my delayed things in childhood, and a bunch of it was stuff that I didn't even know about, you know, like it was stuff that I'd read about online as things that autistic children and babies did, but I was like, I have no idea if that's me, and I wasn't talking to my mum about it, so I had no clue. And I know that my mum must have known some things about autism because my older brother was diagnosed autistic in childhood, and she had worked with like special needs children in various schools and like cared for disabled adults. Like, she must have had some degree of knowledge, but I still don't know if she like researched autism or something, because the things that she was saying were things that like I do believe them to be true, but she was also saying them in the way that like you would read about them, you know, like it was so spot on to being autistic that I was like, how did you not get me diagnosed before? Like, how have you never brought this up to me? How have you always just acted as though like there is something inherently wrong with my personality? But that's for a different video. So she was going through things like I didn't speak until quite a late age, but when I did, it was in full sentences, you know, like I spoke. I didn't make eye contact as a baby. I didn't really react to people in the room or people saying my name. There were lots and lots of things that I just had no idea about from like my very early childhood and like baby time. And it's one of those things where for me, it was quite useful to be able to do that, because there was a lot of stuff that I would not have been able to explain, I just didn't know about, that my mum just sat there and told him, and I was like, oh crap. And I really sort of like forgot that I was there. Like, I was asked very little, I was acknowledged very little, so I very much like I had my legs up in the way that I sit most comfortably. My foot's also going numb like now, actually, now I say that. Sorry, Otis. So yeah, I was sat comfortably. I was like, at the time I'd have called it fidgeting. I know now I was literally stimming in my autism diagnosis. You know, like I was very just, I'd sort of unintentionally dropped the mask because I wasn't being acknowledged, so it didn't really feel like I was there. And when the when he did eventually turn to speak to me, he was very like, okay, I'm just gonna write a few things down that I've observed. And I was like, what? And like looking on it now, it's like, yeah, you were behaving in a very autistic way, but at the time it's like I just forgot that I was being perceived. Like I'm watching the TV show of my mother telling you these things, and I forgot that you could see me too. So then it was my little turn to talk, and he asked me a lot about like my teen years and my like internal feelings and what I think about things. It was honestly like quite an enjoyable chat. Like, I shared about my special interests, I info dumped about things, I got to explain the way that my brain works to someone, and you know, the only word I can think for it is rudimentary. It was quite a rudimentary explanation because I had so little idea of like who I was and how my brain works. But I feel like that also is just how it is to be an undiagnosed autistic, like 22-year-old or something. Like, I was in my 20s, you know? And I think it probably also showed a lot that, you know, when he first turned to me, I was behaving in that way. And the moment he started asking me things, I was like, gotta sit up straight, gotta meet his fucking eyes, gotta make this eye contact. And there was a point when he was like, are you comfortable doing that? And I was like, no, not at all. I hate looking into your eyes. And I also didn't hear the last like 3 things that you said properly because I'm looking into your eyes, so I can't pay attention. And he was like, you can just not make eye contact with me if you want. I was like, oh, incredible, this is great, okay. So it was genuinely quite like a comfortable, enjoyable chat for me. There was just a lot of things I didn't pick up on at the time that looking back on now, I'm like, yeah, like he put me into a situation where I relaxed and unmasked as much as I'm going to, and then he turned the attention on me and saw the way that the mask came up and I had to pretend to be normal. You know, he did a lot of subtle things that I feel would very clearly show my autistic traits, and it makes me kind of really quite sad and angry that I don't feel like a lot of other people have had those situations, you know? Like, I've watched a lot of videos about it. Obviously, when I was going through the process, I've had a lot of people comment about their experiences with diagnosis, and I feel like a lot of people are very much forced to mask their way through it, and then the people diagnosing them are like, well, you're clearly not autistic because you behave so normally, when the entire thing is an act. Whereas I feel like I had someone who was like so well trained and so understanding of like neurodivergence, and especially in late diagnosed people, you know? I think there's a lot of other situations where I would have been so uncomfortable that I probably wouldn't have been diagnosed and would have continued trying to like search for the thing that was wrong with me. But he did it so well and so perfectly that I didn't even like notice what he was doing at the time, you know? It's taken like years of learning to understand myself and learning about being autistic and everything to be like, oh my God, you genius. Like, he is genuinely so well done. So following the conversation he had with me, that was much more personal, I guess. Like, I wasn't having to share like personal things with him, but it was much more based on like me as a person than the stuff that my mum was telling me. The stuff that he was asking my mum about was very much like my early behaviour that I wouldn't have been aware of. And following that, I know that he took time to make notes, but I don't remember if we just like sat in the room with him or if we like went and waited back out in the corridor or something. He wrote a bunch of stuff. Like, I have the notes that he made, and it is quite extensive. I have a video actually reading it out. I'll link it here if you want to read all about hear me read my autism diagnosis, that'll be there. So yeah, he wrote a bunch of stuff, and then I was expecting to have to like go home and wait and get a letter through, but instead he was just immediately, like, I went in and he had a little piece of paper and he was like, yep, I'm diagnosing you with autism spectrum disorder level 2. And I was like, you are, huh? And he was like, yep. So, and then he like explained everything, and my mind was just buzzing. I was just like, oh, so like, first of all, I was like, I was right. And then I was like, shit, I'm autistic. Like, what do I do with that? What am I meant to do now? So I did, like, at the end when he was like, do you have any questions? I'm the person that's always like, no, you've explained everything so well, thank you, I can go now. And instead I was like, yeah, I do. Like, what support is there? What am I meant to do? And it's another one that at the time I was like, why does he look bewildered? And now looking back, I'm like, oh, he was like, oh crap, I've got to tell her that like there isn't any. So he gave me a leaflet. No, he didn't. He sent me a letter later on. He told me that like he'd include all these bits in the letter to try and help me. And he sent me the letter that was the diagnostic like notes and papers and everything that like say I've been diagnosed by a medical professional to be autism spectrum disorder level 2. And along with that letter, there was the form that I was supposed to fill out to get free public transport that I've just never done and really should, because I spend quite a lot of money on buses and trains at this point. And 2 leaflets for 2 different autistic groups that were like in my area but actually weren't. I'd have to get like multiple buses to go to. I did go to one of them at one point and it just was not for me. But that was the support that I was offered. That was the letter that I got, and that was the end of like my diagnostic process. That was that. They were like, you're autistic, here's a couple of bits of paper, off you pop. And I was like, okay, I kind of thought there'd be a bit more to it because I feel like my entire world's been twisted and shifted upside down. But you know, like, I guess that's that. So me and my mum went back out to the car and we drove back to hers in like complete silence, because I was just like, what the fuck am I meant to do with this information? What the fuck am I supposed to do now? Like, it was exhilaration and fear and like, just what the fuck, like, is the best way I can describe it in so many ways. I just didn't know what I was supposed to do with that information. And we got back to my mum's and both my brothers were there, and my mum was like, Dana's just been diagnosed autistic, and they were like, oh right, and nothing changed. Like, that's the thing, is like, as much as the rest of this video I feel like has been quite positive, because my autistic like diagnosis process was quite positive, it was afterwards that I was just like, there's no support, there's no one like letting me know what I'm supposed to do with all of this, you know. Like, my experience of someone being autistic was my brother, and he had like social workers and people that would check in on him and all sorts of like a support system as a child, you know. And he very much chose to leave that as well. Like, he had social workers chasing him up at my mum's house after he'd moved out and all sorts. Like, he was so consistently offered support, and I was like, I'm ready for that, and there just wasn't any. And it's one of those where I really wish that I could end this video on like another upbeat positive thing of like, and here's the support you get afterwards. And like, honestly, the most negative part of it for me was realising afterwards, like, oh, I'm just now left to my own devices and have to figure everything out with this huge piece of like life-changing advice that feels like a massive deal, but no one else is making any sort of a thing about it, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this information. I don't know how I'm supposed to help myself, because now I just have all of these struggles and this absolute like shithole of a life that I don't want, and I'm told like, oh, it's because you're autistic, and that's it, you know. Where's a bit of advice? Where's a bit of support? Where's a bit of something that's going to help me now? And it just wasn't there. And I really don't like that I'm ending it on that kind of a negative note, but I feel like that is just the truth of it, you know. I don't want to lie to you. I don't want to pretend that there is something, and like, everywhere is different, you know. I really hope that where you are, maybe there is some great support afterwards, but my experience and what I got was nothing. So yeah, we've come to the end of like my process of being diagnosed, and also the end of the video. So I post here 3 times a week on Tuesdays, Thursdays and Sundays. I post over on TikTok daily though, so if you wanted to subscribe or find me on TikTok, you could do. I very occasionally post over on Instagram and Twitter. You don't have to follow me there, but they will be linked down below if you wanted to. I was going to say more importantly, but it doesn't feel like it is, and I always get so awkward for this bit, but I do have a Patreon, a Ko-fi, so if you wanted to support me monthly via Patreon or do a one-time donation over on Ko-fi, every little helps. Like, really, I'm so working class, every little helps. I don't mind at all, but also there's no pressure. I feel like most of you that watch my videos are quite in similar positions to me, in similar situations, and that's why you watch me, so I get it. Like, most of us haven't got money, and that's completely fine. There is no pressure, you don't have to. I really like the fact that I can make this content and put it out there for people to see for free, because like I say, I don't feel like there's enough support for autistic people. So if I can provide even one like tiny wee little bit of support for free that's actually accessible and that people can actually gain something from, I'm happy to do that. But also, I am fucking poor, so if you wanted to send me money, you can. And that's the end. I feel like I need to start working that in somewhere in the middle to make it less awkward, but I feel like it won't make it less awkward. I'm always going to be awkward with it. I don't like having to ask you for money. I think YouTube should pay me, and I'm going to keep saying it. So yeah, that's that. Whoever you are and wherever you are, I hope you're having a lovely morning, evening, day, afternoon, week, month, year, and I will see you again in a couple of days.